Hey folks. Well, I can tell you this much. After a day running around in this little truck, I'm impressed. It gets 3 to 4 miles a gallon better while towing than my old work truck that I've got with the V8 that is literally twice the size of this. It makes more horsepower, way more torque, tows better. Even engine aside, the truck is more planted with the same load, doesn't squat as much, doesn't roll in the turns as much. Now there could be a little bit of steering and suspension work I need to do on mine. I don't know. But that's not why I came to you today. Or tonight, whatever. I work night shift. I never know what it is actually. I just kind of walk around in a haze. Anyway, all that to say, I got thinking about something. So, I get frustrated with people being loose with their terminology, especially when it comes to terrible terms and using terrible words to define people that they might just have a disagreement with. So, I wanted to discuss this in two ways and then talk about a solution to one of the problems that we do have in society. The first thing is I want to define a word and a term. Racism. Racist. Okay? The way I always view racist, and I'm sure that you could Webster's dictionary this, is a racist is someone who believes in the inferiority or superiority of a person or people group based on their skin color, region of birth, ethnic background, etc. Systemic racism, which I think the best way to explain that would be just looking no further back than the Jim Crow laws and before that the slavery laws in the United States. Systemic racism. Now there are laws on the books that do have outsized impacts on various communities, but I don't think that just because they have outsized impacts on various communities that it's racist in and of itself. I think that a lot of it, and I haven't done the research to prove my theory on this, but okay, if you pass a law stating that anything that is Schedule 1 by the DEA has minimum sentences by state or by federal law, in certain areas, those drug busts are going to affect different people groups. As an example, I think that a lot of it affects those that are poor, and I think that our justice system is no longer blind, but no longer colorblind, but I think it's not blind by, skin color. I think it's money. I'll tell you a great story here. A good friend of mine, his brother years ago was getting divorced. His brother was, and this is not my quote, I am repeating. My buddy called his brother a professional idiot. Calls him that all the time. Has called him that for years. My buddy's older than me. His brother's 2 years older than him. Well, anyway, his brother had a highly successful landscaping business. Ran 12 months out of the year doing everything from shrubs, ice and snow, tree removal, grass cutting, did apartment complexes, industrial areas, factories, you name it, he did it. At the peak of his business, he had 2 trucks, 2 trailers, 2 mowers per truck, 4 guys per truck, and all the handheld equipment they would need and all the spare parts they need for a given day. And all the fuel. They tried to have 50 yards done by noon. And they tried to have 250 yards done in a week. Now that's each apartment complex was a yard. So I mean, some of them they didn't quite hit their goals daily, but 240, 250 yards a week. So he was getting it. He made crazy money. And whenever he had a customer that paid him in cash, he always just took the cash and stuck it away in a little box in his garage for a rainy day. Never spent his cash. Well, he was getting divorced, and his soon-to-be ex-wife had found his little rainy day fund and got into it and took thousands of dollars of money that he had earned. Granted, it was marital property, but it's supposed to, even if it's no fault, 50-50 split. Well, she had emptied this out, and he reckoned there was probably $10,000 because, over the years, and when you're cutting grass like that, if you've got 10 cash customers at $50 a week, you can do the math on that, and if he didn't get into it for a couple of years, that'd add up real quick. So, call it 10 grand that she could have theoretically stolen from him. He went to the court, tried to get his money back, wouldn't go through. Judge said, you got receipts? He's like, who has a receipt for cash? Well, unless you have a receipt that proves that you had that money, I cannot get it back for you. Well, he was, I think the best word to put it was highly irked. And in front of his lawyer made the remark, boy, I'd love to just black her eyes. His lawyer looked at him dead serious, said, $1,000 will get you out of it. He reaches in his wallet, pulls out 20 crisp $100 bills, and says, I want both of them. A few days later, he sees his wife's car parked at a Shoney. She is having lunch with one of her friends. And he walks in, knocks her out of the booth, and blacks both of her eyes, and then a table full of sheriffs that he walked right past unknowingly tackle him to the ground and have him inside the back of the cop car in under a minute. Got off. So I don't think the justice system is colorblind. I do think that it is prejudiced, but only towards those that can pay up. My opinion, could be wrong. But all that said, I do think that there is still racial prejudice in the minds of people. A lot of people, not all of them, but a lot of them. And I think the best way to attempt to move forward with that is to accuse, if someone is of a different skin color and makes statements that are offensive or does things that are offensive, confront them based on what they did only. You don't need to confront one person on, a person living today on slavery, or a person that's 30 years old on Jim Crow. They had nothing to do with that. In all likelihood, even if their family came over forever ago and their family lived in the South and held slaves and blah, 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 there's not a high probability that that person benefited in the past 60 years from any of that. As a matter of fact, when you look at Civil War America, the South was resource rich but economically poor. They did not have industry, since they were kind of an agricultural center due to primarily slavery. They did not have the ability to wage war as effectively because they had invested their entire economic plan behind the benefits of forced labor. And that wasn't enough for them to build a thriving Southern economy to sustain themselves. If the Civil War would have never been fought, and the South just seceded from the Union and became the Confederate States of America, but the North never fought to end slavery. Oh, okay, well, they formed their own country. We did that, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, when I think it would have been about 90 years when the Civil War broke out. So we'll let them do their thing. They form their own country. Slaves can come across. They'll be freed, but we're not going to go down there. We're not going to defeat them. This will be a peaceful cessation. Okay. If that would have happened, the South, in my estimations, would have ended up 50 years or so behind the North in economic development due to the way that their economy was based. Okay, so if you come across someone who makes insensitive or intentionally hurtful remarks racially, accuse them of what they did, not anything else. The second thing is, I think that if someone is aware of a racist or a group of racists, that someone inside the group that the racists are prejudiced against should attempt to safely interact with these people. I will definitely be putting a link in the description on this, but there is a Joe Rogan interview that I watched with a blues or jazz musician that I'm not 100% sure on, named Daryl Davis. And Daryl Davis is a black gentleman. Very interesting interview that he had with Joe Rogan. And the entire interview went over some of his stories, how this guy had gone to a bar, played a music set when he's down between sets, talking with some of the patrons. Man, you're really good, you're really good. Well, I've got a clubhouse, always have music. Well, no, I can't invite you out there, man. You ain't welcome out there. So ends up, he finds out that this guy was a member of the Klan. And the short version of the story is he ends up, I forget the breakdown of the hierarchy of Klansmen, but the local leader of this Klansman clubhouse or whatever, he gets an interview with this guy, sets it up in a neutral location. They each have one person each there as kind of a witness, and they talk in the interview for about an hour. And he's like, I'm just curious. I don't understand why you think the way you do. I want you to explain it to me with no interruptions. I might just ask questions, but you say whatever you want. And that's basically what happened. And they went on and on and on and on. And the short version of the story is Daryl Davis befriended this Klansman. And after a while, the Klansman turned his robe in. And this guy had done that with numerous people. And he ended up like he was a black man getting invited to Klan functions. which had to be just the strangest invitation ever. And he would ride, like he'd, get in cars with Klansmen, ride to places. He played music for them. They liked the music he played sometimes. So, he just befriended the club and was talking to these guys and kind of explaining, just in basic logic. I mean, nothing crazy. I mean, very basic. Like one of the guys, he's like, well, Daryl, you might not know this, but there's a gene that, makes black people commit crimes. And, well, how do you explain me? I've never been to jail, don't do drugs, don't da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I've had a job, whatever his life was, he lived it, and he lived a fairly upstanding life from all accounts. Well, it hasn't activated yet. He goes, well, I'll tell you what, did you know that all white guys have a gene in them that makes them a serial killer? Or a mass murderer? No. I mean, well, yours hadn't come active yet. And so, just basic logic and kind of gotcha strategies with these guys, but mainly just befriending them and showing them that, you might have statistical outliers in people groups that will behave in better or worse ways, but that the overlapping, if you take, say, the middle 70-80% of people, they're going to behave in ways that are typically agreeable to be around and not, criminal or reprehensible ways. So that's my take on the criminal justice system, and that it isn't colorblind, but a potential way to work on fixing racism. So anyway, that's enough for me. Hope y'all are having a good one. Stay safe, take care. Thanks for tuning in.